The Asus ROG Astral RTX 5080 OC Edition is a premium gaming GPU at a very premium price, but is it really worth it? In this video, we are going to find out. My name is Matt, I'm a former rocket scientist, and my goal is to help you make the right component choices and put them together the right way every single time. In the Is It Worth It series, we've been helping you make the right choice by showing you just how much you can expect to increase performance with a drop-in upgrade. In this video, our focus will be on one of the best Nvidia GeForce GPUs on the market, the Asus ROG Astral RTX 5080 OC Edition, and specifically how it compares to the Sapphire Nitro RX 7900 XTX and RX 9070 XT, the two top Radeon cards from AMD. In addition to showing you benchmarks across 19 games, I will also demystify upscaling technologies, show how the performance of these cards changes with overclocking, and see if a highly overclocked RTX 5080 can compete with an RTX 4090 and 5090. And if you stick around, I'll be giving away one of the best gaming GPUs on the market, an Nvidia RTX 5070 Ti, something you will definitely not want to miss. It's really not rocket science, so before we take a look at the benchmarks, let's jump straight into demystifying game engine upscaling technologies. Image upscaling has become a common graphics option in PC games. In most modern titles, depending on your GPU, you'll be presented with choices between Nvidia's Deep Learning Super Sampling, or DLSS, AMD's Fidelity FX Super Resolution, or FSR, or Intel's Xe Super Sampling, or XeSS. All are upscaling technologies that promise higher frame rates in games. Nvidia has enjoyed an early advantage in terms of image quality. However, AMD recently released a new version of FSR with their new RDNA4 graphics cards, so it'll be interesting to see if this will be enough to bridge the gap. At a high level, upscaling technologies such as FSR and DLSS render your game at a lower resolution to improve performance. They then use algorithms to upscale the image to fit your monitor and fill in missing information based on various inputs. Despite accomplishing the same goal, FSR and DLSS used to leverage very different approaches. Older versions of FSR used an algorithm to upscale the image and fill in missing details before applying a sharpening filter. It was basically temporal super resolution, or TSR, but with AMD's branding. However, with the introduction of FSR4, AMD moved away from a software-only approach to a machine learning-based approach that leverages dedicated AI hardware, which is very similar to DLSS. AMD claims this approach significantly improves image quality over FSR 3.1 with better detail preservation and reduced ghosting and artifacts. The downside is that it's only available on 9000 series GPUs, since earlier Radeon cards do not have the hardware accelerated features found in the new RDNA4 architecture. So which upscaling technology is better? If we take a look at two games that use the latest version of these upscalers, Horizon Forbidden West and Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, we should be able to answer this question. First, let's start by comparing FSR 3 to FSR 4 so we can see if AMD really was able to improve image quality. It's immediately apparent that FSR 4 is a far superior implementation of upscaling, fixing virtually all of the issues we saw with FSR 3. For example, a big area where FSR 3 struggled was with ghosting. But as you can see with FSR 4, this has been resolved, with the waterfall now showing the water particles as intended, in a much more realistic way. If we now compare FSR 4 with DLSS, it's clear that FSR 4 is superior to the DLSS 3 CNN model, delivering better detail. However, when you compare it to the DLSS 4 transformer model, it falls behind. If you look closely at the pouch, rope, and quiver, DLSS 4 clearly offers superior image quality, with FSR 4 not too far behind, occupying a place between the CNN and transformer models in terms of detail and anti-aliasing. For high motion sequences, the ranking doesn't really change, with the transformer model again showing superior clarity and image quality. If we take a look at Ratchet & Clank, this advantage isn't always maintained, with the DLSS 4 transformer model offering better background detail, while the FSR 4 model shows less aliasing or jaggedness in the confetti. With that said, AMD is still behind Nvidia in terms of image reconstruction, but they took a huge leap forward with the introduction of FSR 4. Upscaling is now a feature you can look forward to on an AMD GPU, something that was tough to claim in the past. FSR 4 is better than the DLSS 3 CNN model in key areas, but it's not quite at the level of the DLSS 4 transformer model. As mentioned earlier, the focus for this video is on the Asus ROG Astral RTX 5080, and specifically how it compares to the Sapphire Nitro RX 7900 XTX and RX 9070 XT. The test system being used to run the benchmarks is my AMD AM5 Open Bench table with the following components. For the CPU, we have an AMD Ryzen 7 9800X3D. For the motherboard, we have an Asus ROG Crosshair X870E Hero. For RAM, we have G.Skill Ripjaws M5 Neo RGB 32GB of DDR5 6000 at CL26. For GPU 1, we have an Asus ROG Astral GeForce RTX 5080 OC Edition. For GPU 2, we have a Sapphire Nitro Plus AMD Radeon RX 9070 XT. For GPU 3, we have a Sapphire Nitro Plus AMD Radeon RX 7900 XTX VaporX. For the CPU cooler, we have an Asus ROG Ryo 3 360mm AIO. For storage, we have a 4TB Samsung 990 Pro NVMe Gen 4 M.2 SSD. And for the PS2, we have a Corsair HX1200i Platinum 1200W power supply. Affiliate links for all of these components are listed in the description below. The ROG Astral RTX 5080 is an amazing piece of hardware with a lot of great features, such as quad fans, a phase change thermal pad, premium power delivery, and a full metal shroud. But the one I like the most is the thermal map and power detector feature in GPU Tweak 3, which is currently only available on Astral cards. Power Detector Plus can detect anomalies across any of the 6 power pins from the 12-volt high power cable. If a fault is detected, you're immediately notified in Windows with a pop-up warning. This actually happened during benchmark testing for this video. The current across some of the pins was too high and an alert was generated. As a result, I decided to switch to a new power cable, preventing what could have been serious damage to the card. All testing was performed with the GPUs at their default clocks. For the ROG Astral RTX 5080, I used the Asus TGP update tool to increase the power limit to 450 watts. I also applied a number of performance-enhancing tweaks to the 9800X3D, which can be found in my How to Tweak an AMD AM5 Ryzen CPU step-by-step guide and How to Undervolt a Ryzen 7 9800X3D the right way videos. In order to thoroughly test the GPUs, I ran the benchmarks at 4K Ultra settings. I selected 4K as the test resolution because these are high-end cards targeted at 4K gamers. As I've explained in prior videos, this will place maximum load on each GPU, which is the best way to compare relative performance. I also decided against using frame generation for the benchmarks to avoid any biasing of the results. I did, however, use upscaling, but only when it was automatically selected as part of the standard graphics options, which when used is clearly denoted on the charts. With the GPUs ready to go, let's check the benchmarks. As you can see from the benchmark results, the RTX 5080 performed well against the two top AMD gaming GPUs, beating them by over 15% in average FPS at stock settings. But what happens if we try overclocking? To overclock the Astral RTX 5080, I used GPU Tweak 3 from Asus, which offers advanced monitoring features that were mentioned earlier in the video. Unfortunately, Nvidia does not currently allow you to manually alter the GPU and memory clocks directly in the Nvidia app, which is something that AMD Adrenalin has offered for a long time. The four variables that I tuned in GPU Tweak 3 were power target, GPU voltage, GPU boost clock, and memory clock. To learn how to dial in an optimum overclock, you can follow the steps I outline in my How to Overclock an Nvidia GPU the Right Way guide. For my Asus ROG Astral GeForce RTX 5080 OC Edition card, I was able to increase the GPU boost clock by 360 MHz and the effective memory clock by 5600 megatransfers per second, which equates to a 350 MHz memory clock boost. These represent 15% increases over default clocks, which is great. To see what impact this overclock has on performance, I ran 3D Mark Speedway, Port Royal, and Steel Nomad at stock settings and compared it against the overclock. I also overclocked and undervolted the RX 7900 XTX and RX 9070 XT using the steps I outlined in my How to Undervolt and Overclock a Radeon RX 9070 XT guide. As you can see from the data, the increase in performance for the ROG Astral RTX 5080 was significant, with improvements of around 12% over default settings. This is approximately double what I was able to achieve on the Sapphire Nitro RX 9070 XT, and similar to what I was able to achieve on the 7900 XTX. Given that the ROG Astral comes heavily overclocked from the factory, it's clear that Nvidia designed the RTX 5080 with a significant amount of overclocking headroom. In fact, the performance increase of the ROG Astral RTX 5080 was so good that I was able to come within a few percent of the 3D Mark benchmark records without disabling background programs or fine-tuning the overclock, which is super impressive. The temperatures were also great, even after overclocking, which shows the exceptional cooling that the Astral card offers. If we now look at some games, starting with Total War Warhammer III, it becomes clear that the performance increases similar to the 3D Mark results, with average increases of 12.8% for the 7900 XTX, 8.2% for the 5080, and 6.9% for the 9070 XT. In fact, when you look at all of the games I tested, you see very similar results, with average increases of 8.9, 11.4, and 6.9% in Cyberpunk 2077, 10.4, 11.4, and 7.7% in Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020, 9.4, 11.4, and 6.2% in Call of Duty Black Ops 6, and 9, 11.2, and 5.4% in Monster Hunter Wilds. So the highest synthetic benchmark overclock performance for the RTX 5080 does indeed translate into a similar boost in games. This shouldn't be surprising given that these synthetic benchmarks are essentially non-playable games that are designed and developed to test your GPU in exactly the same way that modern games do. It's important to keep in mind that these results are silicon dependent, so if you plan to overclock your GPU, then please use these settings as guidance only. While it's great that the Astral RTX 5080 can be overclocked to significantly boost performance in games, is it enough to compete against the RTX 4090 and 5090? To help answer this question, I reran 3D Mark Speedway, Port Royal, and Steel Nomad for the RTX 4090 and RTX 5090 at stock settings, and compared it against the max overclock for the RTX 5080. As you can see from the results, the ROG Astral RTX 5080 with a max overclock was indeed able to outperform an RTX 4090 at stock settings by around 10% in Steel Nomad. However, the RTX 5090 was able to outperform it by around 40%, even at stock settings, which is impressive. If we now look at a few games, starting with Total War Warhammer III, we can see that the Astral RTX 5080 beats the RTX 4090 by around 7%. But similar to the 3D Mark benchmarks, the RTX 5090 is able to beat it by around 30%. If we now look at Cyberpunk 2077, we can see that the RTX 4090 offers similar performance to the overclocked 5080, whereas the 5090 pulls ahead by around 23%. And finally, if we look at Call of Duty Black Ops 6, we see that the 4090 and 5090 both offer superior average FPS performance. However, the overclocked 5080 does offer more consistent and stable gameplay, beating both cards in 1% low FPS. So while an overclocked RTX 5080 isn't able to beat a 5090 at stock settings, it is able to offer equal or better performance in most games when compared with an RTX 4090 at stock settings, which is impressive given the large price difference. In this video, I tested one of the best Nvidia GeForce GPUs, the Asus ROG Astral RTX 5080 OC Edition, against the two top Radeon cards from AMD, the Sapphire Nitro Plus RX 7900 XTX and 9070 XT, to see if it's really worth it. As you can see from the results, the 5080 put on a dominant display, winning 83% of the tests, with the 7900 XTX winning 11% and 9070 XT winning 6%. If we now look at the average gaming performance across 17 games, we see that the RTX 5080 is able to offer a 16% increase in FPS over the 7900 XTX, while also offering a 13% increase in 1% low performance, which is good, but not great when you consider that the 7900 XTX was AMD's last gen flagship. When you compare the RTX 5080 against against the newer RX 9070 XT, the performance margin increases further, which is understandable given that the 9070 XT is a 70 series class GPU. If you now look at power efficiency, you see that this is where Nvidia really shines, beating the 7900 XTX by over 50% and the newer 9070 XT by over 30%. AMD was able to make improvements in power efficiency with RDNA 4, but they clearly have much more work to do to catch up with Nvidia. But what happens when we look at cost? The Astral RTX 5080 launch price was listed by Asus as $1,500, which is 39% higher than the launch price for the Sapphire Nitro Plus 7900 XTX and almost double the launch price of the Sapphire Nitro Plus 9070 XT. If you convert those prices into gaming efficiency or FPS per dollar, then it becomes clear that the Astral 5080 does not offer good value relative to the competition. In fact, the Sapphire Nitro Plus 9070 XT offers over 30% better value, which is impressive. However, anyone that has attempted to buy an ROG Astral RTX 5080 will tell you that it was a paper launch with very limited availability and that it's selling for much more. Given the impact of tariffs, retailer greed, and scalpers, the pricing for all high-end GPUs has increased, so it becomes difficult to lock in a stable real-world price for each card. So to account for this, I plotted FPS per dollar versus price for each card. As you can see from this chart, if the ROG Astral RTX 5080 increases to $1,800, which is its current price on the Asus eStore, the value drops by around 20%, making both of the AMD alternatives significantly better value, even at their inflated prices. So is the Asus ROG Astral RTX 5080 really worth it? Given the performance, power efficiency, features, and overclockability, the Astral 5080 is truly an amazing GPU. The only problem, and it's a big one, is price. At its launch price of $1,500, it doesn't offer great value. But if you want best-in-class performance and features, then it's a card you should consider. However, at its current price of $1,800, the value that it offers is terrible, especially when you consider that the RTX 5090 Founders Edition only costs $200 more and offers around 25% more performance at stock settings. If you have a Sapphire Nitro Plus RX 7900 XTX, I would wait and see if Nvidia comes out with a super version in 2026 before considering an upgrade. If, however, you are in the market for a new card, I would recommend either buying a cheaper RTX 5080 variant, trying to get your hands on an RTX 5090 FE card, or buying a Sapphire Nitro Plus 9070 XT. You will lose some performance, but your wallet will thank you. All of these options are better than spending $1,800 on a card that really should be priced around $1,400. As I've said many times, I really do love Asus ROG components. They come with excellent features, they look great, and they perform well. As a result, consumers have come to expect to pay a premium for them. But 80% over MSRP is simply too much to recommend. Remember, it's not rocket science, it's Lego. My goal is to help you make the right component choices and put them together the right way every single time. Thank you for watching this video in the Is It Worth It upgrade series. To celebrate hitting the 15,000 subscriber milestone, I'll be giving away an MSI GeForce RTX 5070 Ti Ventus 3X OC GPU to one lucky viewer. I know how difficult it is to get your hands on a next-gen GPU, so hopefully this will help someone avoid the crazy prices and be able to game on this amazing GPU. Details on how to enter are listed in the description below. Good luck and bye for now.